let's start with a round of introductions. I'll start with introducing myself. My name is Kunal Khattar. I run a mobility fund, focused fund called AdvantEdge. We've been investing on the auto aftermarket side since 2015. Two funds are deployed in the process of raising a third fund. And we've sort of been able to recognize the importance and the acceleration of the auto industry moving away from ICE to EVs with our first investment in the EV space back in 2018, so almost 5 years ago. So now we're going to just run through the room. And Kaushik, if you can start by introducing yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Kunal, and thank you again, Zypp team, for inviting me on this panel. My name is Kaushik Burman. I am the General Manager for Gogoro India. Very happy to be here and excited to learn and share some feedback. In fact, I feel that the title should be swapping and charging and rapid charging and verse instead of versus because of the complexity of the problem that we are all aiming to solve here. So yeah, very excited. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Pankaj, are you here?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Pankaj, one of the co-founders at Lognin Materials, completely a battery tech, material science focused company developing batteries that can be fast charged. So on the fast charge camp today, looking at enabling the ecosystem on the OE side to give them a robust battery, creating opportunities for last mile deliveries to be happening on electric vehicles, primarily batteries that are designed for B2B, not so much for B2C at this point of time. And yeah, looking at two very prime chemistries, the LTO and the LFP chemistries is something that we work with.
Cool. Akshat, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kunal, Zypp team, everybody on the panel itself. My name is Akshat. I lead strategic partnerships at Exponent Energy. We are primarily an energy company where we focus on simplifying energy for EVs. We work on both the battery and the charging side. We do 0 to 100% charge in 15 minutes, and we are cell agnostic, voltage agnostic, capacity agnostic. Happy to be here and discuss more on how we enable more and more users, more and more OEMs to get into the EV bandwagon. And I think whether it's swapping, whether it's charging, I think the whole objective is how do we do a seamless energy delivery for the customers to benefit from it. Happy to discuss further. Thank you.
Hey, Rachit, why don't you go next? Sorry, I don't know if Rachit is there. Anant, is Anant there? If Anant's not there, then Avinash, I think we'll end with you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Avinash. I work as the CEO of ElectricPe. I founded the company close to 2 years now to primarily address the challenge of range anxiety, one of the largest blockers, of course, amongst other things, to EV adoption. Our product is like an Airbnb or a Book My Show of EV charging using ElectricPe. In a single app, you can find ChargePay, find rapid charge. I used to call it fast charge, but now it's rapid charging. Find fast charge pay, or potentially find swap pay also. Thank you. Happy to be here and learn from everyone.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the title is, of course, charging versus swapping. Let's start with sort of a simple question. Is India is not only a price-sensitive market, but also always deficit with respect to capital. And of course, in an attempt to build or to bring the cost of ICE and EVs closer together to accelerate adoption, I think one of the most important thing is cost of capital. So given that it may, on the one hand, of course, separating the owner requires incremental capital because you have to have extra batteries. So if capital was the only requirement, near term and long term, I guess these are two separate time continuums that we must consider. What is everybody's opinion in terms of what's going to win in the short term and what's going to win in the long term? Why don't we start with Kaushik, and then we can go down around the room.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. So the enormity of the problem, as I mentioned at the onset, is huge. we've got almost 300 million units of ICE vehicles, two-wheelers in stock in India as we speak, right? And growing at what, 14, 15, I think all-time high was about roughly 20 million annual sales. So if you look at the next 5 to 7 years, we're going to look at even with the replacement demand, that this stock of 300 million is going to grow to 450, 500 million units. And then you've got three-wheeler stock, which is quite massive. So our view here is that the anomaly, the extent of the problem that we're trying to solve is that it will require a mosaic of solutions here, whether it's charging slow or fast, rapid charging or battery swapping. Form factors, especially 2 and 3 wheels in densely populated cities of India, will require a combination of practical decisions such as where's the real estate available and how expensive is it, and what are the activity turns. And in Gogoro we call this as in terms of our asset utilization levels. So if we look at all these data points and some of the learnings that we have picked up from our home market in Taiwan and some of the other markets where we have launched our products, we feel that battery swapping for 2 and 3 wheels is a no-brainer, especially in densities. We have seen this time and again play over across different use cases, whether it's logistics, last mile, and or ride sharing. I think clearly the use cases, least downtime, money. There's money on the table if you have downtime issues, right? So for the rider as well as the fleets and fleet operators, therefore the battery swapping as a solution is a no-brainer. However, as you go into 4 wheels form factor in terms of cars, passenger cars, or commercial trucks and buses, you will require a plethora of solutions. My broad experiences from my days in the energy sector lead me to believe that there will be multiple solutions that will be required. So, for example, you don't need battery swapping for trucks and buses, and even for passenger cars. I mean, some of the OEMs are trying this out in China and the US, but for 2 and 3 wheels, which is almost the largest use case in India, we think that battery swapping is the way to go.
Cool. Pankaj, why don't you give where Log9 stands in terms of these things?
Yeah, I think the focus definitely has to be serving the customer and giving the customer what they want and when they want. These are the two very broad strokes at which we focus at. And from Log9 perspective, I think it's all about whether you swap or you fast charge. It's about reducing the downtime. And when you have a 2-wheeler, 3-wheeler, you have the same situation that you want when you buy a business asset like a last mile delivery asset. You want it to be 18-hour operationally available. And you cannot afford to downtime, let's say 1 hour, 2 hour, if it's a 3-wheeler, 4-hour charging time. And hence the demand in the market is to make a vehicle that is 18-hour deliverable. And that's what the customer wants, that's what the Amazon wants, that's what the fleet guys want. How do you attack that problem? Well, you attack it either you swap or fast charge. For Log9, it's about building the tech stack that is expandable to any kind of a vehicle platform. So, the same battery technology that goes into our 3-wheelers, the same technology goes into our 2-wheelers, and the same one goes into a 4-wheeler and now going into a bus. So for a deep tech battery technology company, what you need is your production center aligned to different vehicle platforms and then giving them that one specific power, which is to fast charge. So for example, on Log9 or 2-wheelers, the charging time is, let's say, about 10 minutes. On a 3-wheeler, the charging time is about 30 minutes. On a 4-wheeler, the charging time is about 45 to 50 minutes. And we've already commercialized over 2,800 batteries by now in the market. So we're gathering a lot of data. These are a large number of batteries that are already moving into the market. And you get that. And when you see for how long do people charge it? Do they take it all the way to 0 to 100%, or do they take it? Those are places where you see that everybody is just plugging it in for a short period of time. They're trying to top up the vehicle and then they move. So I think that's the viewpoint with which we're looking at the market at this point of time. And I truly believe that stationary fast charge battery is also a very strong long-term solution in the market. And as swap comes in for two-wheeler, three-wheeler, that will provide an alternate options to the customers.
Akshat, you want to sort of highlight where you stand and where Exponent is in terms of building out rapid charging?
Sure. I think ultimately, what Pankaj said is right. Ultimately, we are here to serve our customers at the end. And to talk about mobility as a subject, I think we at Exponent very, very strongly believe that mobility is all about freedom. Since right from the days when we were walking, motor transport and everything, mobility has always been about how can I move faster, whenever I want, wherever I want. And that was very true when ICE vehicle evolved over time. And today we see a whole gambit of options where people just pick a vehicle and drive anywhere they want. When we moved towards EV, I think the drive side performance was very, very good. And there's more power, more torque, and people start to love EVs. A lot of technology development happened in that space. But overall, I think the charge time was one of the biggest bottlenecks which started to hamper the freedom of mobility, as we call it, internally. And that's where started to think about different solutions. And I think that's where swapping also came out as an option that, hey, if I am buying an asset and I can't wait for 2 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours to charge my vehicle itself because it hampers my ability to move, what do I do? One is obviously, can I change my battery completely, which is a battery swap, or do I go and do charging? And is there a possibility of doing fast charging? Now, a slow charging, this kills flexibility, freedom, mobility, for mobility, and hence swap came into picture. But if you look at the scalability and the underlying problems in the swap itself, you still need to manage a lot of batteries at the back end. You need to charge those batteries, and those batteries still take 4 to 6 hours to charge, which means that I need to expend a lot of extra capital into managing those float batteries out there itself. So the way a swap company's efficiency also increases if they're able to charge those batteries faster and have a quicker turnaround there itself. So in our view, I think swapping is an intermediate solution that helps the industry to move faster towards the electric bandwagon, because there's not a lot of fast charging batteries out there. But I think with the new technology advancements and rapid charging come into picture, I mean, rapid charging is required for swap as well to bring in more efficiency and help on the cost structure itself. So no matter what the category is, I think rapid charging in the long run is a natural stance to be in, whether you're delivering energy through a swap or you're directly delivering a rapid charging through the charger itself. I think the technology rapid charging is definitely in India needs, especially if you want to reduce the size of the battery also, because India, as you rightly said, cares about cost also. So if you want to reduce the upfront cost on the vehicle itself, you need to have a smaller battery that can run longer, last longer, charge faster. And I think overall, whether you do a swap, whether you do a charging, rapid charging becomes the base technology out there. And then we talk about the operations and use cases where battery ownership makes sense on the vehicle, or you want to have a separate company owning battery, or the real estate or operational requirements mandate you to not install a charger but install a swap station. I mean, those are the modalities and integrities that will start defining which cases swapping is there or which case direct charging is there. And from Exponent point of view, we focus on commercial vehicles. We see a great product market fit wherein the downtime is minimized, where you have an asset running 22 to 24 hours a day, where you can do a 15-minute charging and top it up. And we can design the battery based on what the user wants, what capacity they want. So we see a great value in rapid charging in the commercial vehicles. We operate on 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, and above. And that's where we see a great product.
Okay, great. Avinash, let's hear your ElectricPe's point of view on this.
Sure. So my point of view essentially is just paraphrasing what we've observed over the last 2 years in ElectricPe, and specifically what I have observed over the last 8 years being in the industry. 2 years in ElectricPe, 3 years in Sun Mobility, and before that, almost 3 years with Ola, where we're part of the earliest EV building track, so to say. all three technologies are getting adopted in parallel with equal momentum as a function of the use case specific to the customer is what we've observed. In both personal as well as commercial mobility, there are two kinds of customers, what we've observed on ground. One is somebody who is a high power user, somebody who's doing in excess of 150 kilometers, for example, correct? And then there is a medium power user, specifically in commercial mobility, somebody who's doing between 90 to 100 kilometers, up to 120. And 35 kilometers on a daily basis. So a lot of the low power personal mobility use cases, most of them in fact, seem to be adopting fixed charging, preferring fixed charging, that too using a 3.3 kilowatt solution. E-rickshaws, very clearly no-brainer. Swapping is making sense in the high power user use case. Four-wheelers, clearly a no-brainer. Fast charging, especially somebody who's doing intercity trips. A lot of people actually charge cars overnight. A Tata Nixon takes about 8.5 hours to charge at your home, and then people travel to office and top it up at the destination location. So summarizing my point of view, all three are being observed to be adopted as a function of the use case. Low power is seeming to use fixed charging, specifically 3.3 kilowatt hours. Medium power users are looking at in-person mobility, are looking at fast charging, and hyperly swapping seems to be the.
Anant, hi and welcome. Why don't you, for the sake of all this others who have joined, go ahead and just give your quick introduction to yourself, and would love to hear Sun Mobility's point of view on on this topic, given that you guys were the pioneers and really some might say idea ahead of the time, but definitely people who created a path for a lot of other companies to follow. So I'd love to hear your
Thank
views
you,
on this.
Kunal, and hi everyone. Sorry for the delay. I was a bit confused with the time. My name is Anant Badjatya. I'm the CEO of Sun Mobility. I've joined now for almost 13 months here. It's been an exciting journey. I personally believe, as everybody is saying, there are use cases for all forms of charging and swapping, but if I look at it from battery swapping point of view, and I'll just talk mostly around why, see, the key issue around EV adoption in India, 3 or 4 points. One is upfront cost, which many people talk about, yes. Range anxiety, everybody talks about, that's that. Infrastructure, then, but nobody talks about technological obsolescence, right? Now, what is, so battery swapping is hitting at the very core of all these issues to make EV adoption much more, is expediting it by reducing, when you're taking out the battery from the equation, you're reducing the upfront cost significantly, 40-45%. And we're talking about micro-mobility, that cost is huge. Across all the sectors, but I'm talking micro-mobility here, 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, so 1.5 ton vehicles, right? It becomes a very big determinant for all those people because they don't access finance at 13-15%. They access finance at 20 plus 25%. This thing, right? The upfront cost matters a lot to them, even if it is a couple of thousand rupees more. So upfront cost, range anxiety is definitely addressed by battery swapping because it's unlimited. You can just swap. It's not charging; it's swapping. But what we really don't, one of the key issues around battery swapping is technological obsolescence that it addresses. Because today, most of the people are worried, the pace of technology is so fast that I don't know whether I want to be going with specific set of specs today and what will happen 6 months down the line, right? Some better battery will come, the way we are working on fast charging and rapid charging. What will be the thing after 6 months or 12 months? Nobody knows. And why should I jump in now? Should I wait for 12 months? I think battery swapping just takes this completely out of the equation because you don't own the battery anymore for the customer, right? You go in without the battery, and if there's an upgrade, the customer enjoys it. I was giving an example a couple of days back in one of the forums that you buy an iPhone 13 and within 1 year, iPhone 14 comes in and iPhone 13 becomes useless, right? Nothing goes wrong. So I think these are the things in a country like India, where, in the metro cities and all, I think battery swapping is a very compelling economics. In, I think, rural areas, fixed battery will rule because, the swapping stations and the infrastructure will be going, even charge points will be, you can always charge back in fixed batteries at homes and all in rural areas and tier 3, tier 4 cities. But I think to start with battery swapping in we see across all the form factors, 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, e-rickshaws.
And given that, what is it that you feel will help India become catch up, not only catch up, but potentially overtake other countries? Akshat, why don't you start, and then I can, anybody else wants to take that.
Sure. Right. So I think, as you rightly put it, India has a very different requirement as we compare to the West itself. I mean, one is on a very basic level, we talk about the charging itself. The sort of chargers that you find in the West does not necessarily work in India itself. And it's primarily to do with, how the grid profiles in India are. And, the reason why voltage stabilizer industry flourishes in India. So India has one of the very different unique grids. Also, if we talk about a requirement of a vehicle itself, the upfront cost, as we were talking about, is very, very different when we talk about Europe versus India. Most of a typical India affords a range worth of a vehicle itself. So upfront cost matters in India, which means while the entire world is chasing an energy density and wanting to put more and more energy into the same available space, it becomes very important for India to have a battery pack that is small itself and can charge faster and last longer. So this is sort of a very basic requirement that India has. Secondly, all the EV ecosystem that we have developed till now in the West is primarily about home charging and overnight charging itself. Whereas India, frankly, do not have we are not great at parking itself. Most of our vehicles get parked on the roads. We talk about 2-wheelers, we talk about commercial vehicles. I mean, that's 95 to 100% is getting parked on the roads itself. Even 2-wheelers or 4-wheelers get parked on the roads itself. So India needs a public refueling ecosystem. That's where India thrives on. And hence you need to work on having a public infrastructure out there where you can charge faster, top up faster. The battery should last longer itself to compensate for the overall kilometers that you want to drive in India. So, for example, if I talk about a 400-kilometer range worth of a vehicle with a battery lasting 1,000 cycles, you are running 4 lakh kilometers itself. If India is affording a 100-kilometer range worth of battery, to run those 4 lakh kilometers, I need a 4,000 cycle life on the battery itself. And I can't do that with slow charging and spending 4 hours or 8 hours charging. So I need an ecosystem, I need a solution out there, which is very, very different from the West itself. And hence we design, develop solutions. And, that's where I think a lot of advantages will come also. And, other than this, I think India has a very different temperature profiles. So we need to focus on that as well. So solving for the cost in India, operations in India, parking in India, and temperature in India, I think gives us an advantage. And if we solve for all these problems, I think India can become a leader into this space itself.
Kaushik, Gogoro has, of course, gone through that cycle growth phase and all in Taiwan and other countries, and now coming to India. Love to hear where you guys stand in terms of what is it unique about India that could potentially help us leapfrog.
Yeah, I think it's a complex question. To succeed in India, you need to have affordable products and yet high quality. There's no trade-off between affordability and quality. And to electrify India, you need an accessible network. And each of these are massive flywheels to kind of design and create momentum. So I think the government policy is a sure short way of doing things right at the onset. So we've seen some very progressive policies from the government on, for example, stoking customer demand. There's been FAME 2, and now there's a lot of talk on auto PLI, which is going to incentivize OEMs and drive incentivization upstream to kind of focus on getting cost structures in shape. And if we have to do this right, we have to make sure that we have a very strong and robust supply chain. I mean, if you look at China in the last 2 decades, there's been a lot of concerted efforts to develop supply chains which are diversified, they've thought that through, right? So this is a time for us to kind of, with the discovery of some of the good news that came from J&K in terms of lithium mines. I think it's still early days, but we are trending in the right direction. There are a lot of players who are interested in advanced cell chemistry. So the idea is, how do you take this to execution and do cell manufacturing in India on scale so that you're able to bring cost down of the battery pack. The battery pack costs are the highest, right, in the EV component system, across form factors. And about 60% of the battery pack costs are cell costs. So how do you not just rely on lithium NMC chemistry, but other chemistries as well to kind of do this on scale? Can we scale on sodium ion cell chemistry, for example? Again, these are questions to follow through. Won't be solvable overnight, but I think the focus on developing supply chains and driving cost economics will help in passing some of these benefits downstream to customers. We are, at least on behalf of Gogoro, I can say that we are committed to making this work in India. We are committed to equip, upscale, and contribute to developing these supply chains in India and technology transfer to India to be able to do this on scale. But it won't be done overnight. It will take time, because these are large, complex energy projects, and these are contingent on policies both at a central level as well as state level. So there are efforts underway to sort of make sure that the broad policy and advocacy efforts are beneficial to the industry partners as well. So we have formed the Indian Battery Swap Association with partners such as Sun Mobility. So despite being competitors in the space, the idea is to sort of make sure that we all cooperate and create this industry together, and have a much more mature way of creating a level playing ground for everybody to win. It will require more collaborative partnerships across the value chain.
Great. Thank you. Sure, great. So that's good to hear. You guys are partnering with competitors, and I think that's it. It helps when everybody comes together and creates standardization, helps in the adoption. Anant, your point of view on this, given that collaboration is important as well as healthy competition.
Absolutely. No, I think apart from what everybody else has said, there are a couple of points which are very fundamentally different for India. When the question that you asked was, how can we leapfrog in this specific space? And if I talk about micromobility, two-wheeler, three-wheeler, India with the OEMs like Bajaj and Piaggio and TVS is the biggest in the world. We are the largest two-wheeler country with 80% is 85% is two-wheeler and three-wheeler for us. So it's a huge market, and we have OEMs which are dominant not only in India but also in Africa, in Latin America, in Far East. So what we develop here in India, for the first time, you can ensure that these things can be replicated in those parts of the world, which will give us the edge. Right. So what we develop here in India, the policies, the regulations, the things, and all, I think that will give us the edge, which was not hitherto when you talk about cars and all might not be there. Right. So this is one space I really believe, with the kind of volume, the market that we are looking at, and with government push, I think government is very keen to push electric agenda. A lot of work is going on, and I think it's combined. So there's a push from the government, pull from the market, and there is a very good ecosystem in place with the OEMs being very competent and willing and able to drive the change, which is not possibly there in many other areas that we want to be a leader in.
Sure. Great. Thank you. Pankaj, Avinash, any additional points you want to add, or if you have a counter to what has been said so far?
So what will help India leapfrog was your original question, Kunal.
Yep.
I'm taking a slightly different stab at it. One, I think I have observed India moving the tech stack, the India tech stack moving more from a services perspective, which used to be 30 odd years ago, to a deep tech proprietary product perspective. For example, the brilliant work which is being done by the people who are representing, for example, Log9 here, Exponent here. We are building our own deep tech. A. B. India is a highly competitive market, clearly, which ends up creating the best solution for customers. 3. There's a huge amount of investment dollars. And Kunal, you could obviously, add your point of view to it, but there's a huge amount of investment dollar interest which is coming into India, especially on the sustainability side of the things, which again helps organizations like us to create better solutions. And 4, India, I think, is a very strong pull market, which means the customer needs bahut zyada in bahut kam, and which ends up again creating a lot, which will end up creating the ecosystem, like you mentioned, to help us probably leapfrog and not just follow. 1. 2, what we need is, and I completely agree with Kaushik, is an integrated ecosystem where OEMs, be charging providers, be it rapid charging or fast charging, regular charging, swapping companies, and battery tech companies, all of them are working together, which is already happening, like Anant rightly observed. That's where we are also, as ElectricPe, sort of bringing together OEMs, the partnership with Hero, partnership with Snowbroker, getting into societies, getting partnerships with dealers, etc., etc., etc. I always maintain there are 2 things which the India requires. One is a good quality product at an acceptable price point. Over time, we've seen that the product quality has improved. I specifically speak about automobiles, electric, of course. The price points have started to improve. Swapping helps in a big manner. Without swapping also, however, there are enough number of electric two-wheelers which are available at a comparable price point today to a Hero Honda Splendor or a Honda Activa 4G. It's already available in the market. So the first problem is getting solved over time as economies of scale is increasing. The second thing which we require is, again, a big solution to range anxiety, which is where will I charge? Primarily, 1, how will I pay? Which means with whom do I trust my money that I'm actually paying for what I'm consuming? And 3, what will I do if I get stuck? And where someone just mentioned that's where we need a robust infrastructure of public charging, rapid charging or regular charging or swapping. Those are things which I think are needed in order to help us leapfrog.
Great. No, thank you, Avinash. Pankaj, last thoughts?
Yeah, I think, sorry. Very, very, very quickly, it's very clear that India is this hyper cost sensitive market. Everybody agrees to that. And hence in that market, when you're extremely cost sensitive, the big discussion between should I own the battery, should I swap it? And that question gets driven by few factors. For example, when you want to own the battery, then the questions kick in that when I own the battery, should I slow charge or fast charge? Because when I slow charge at, let's say, 6 rupees per kilowatt hour. Or if I fast charge it, I'm going to go 12 rupees or 24 rupees, depending which city, which state you're charging that. So it kind of have very big ramification in terms of decision making for customers when you want to own it, and then the decision between the two. But beyond that, I think when the private customers are buying, that's what typically they look at it. But when the businesses are getting it, they're doing the TCO calculation. It says what's going to be a total cost of ownership. And there's a big component that comes into it is the resale value of your asset. Because if you want to get your asset financed, you need to be you want to get a predictability on depreciation of that asset. And in electric vehicles, it's very difficult to happen to the battery over 3, 4, 5 years. And hence you need predictive depreciative models. You need technology that substantiates that depreciation. So if I buy a bunch of cells and put them all together in a battery pack and throw it into the market, who's going to ensure the depreciation of that? Who's going to do the work to understand how that battery pack will get consumed over the life cycle of the vehicle? And I think as customers are getting more and more involved with the purchase decisions, and they're buying large number of vehicles. This question comes in the center of that conversation between swap and fixed. In swap, the customer is actually just buying the shell of the vehicle. So he's not focused at the resale part of the vehicle, value of that vehicle. So it's a very different use case. I just wanted to highlight this thing. How to answer this, maybe we can take it up a little later, but these are some of the things that come up when people are looking and thinking, okay, fine, I'm going to have a 50 vehicle fleet or a 100 vehicle fleet. Should I get a log9 battery that's certified for 5, 7, 10 years, or should I go for a swap? Purely from a financial perspective. And those conversations, we've been part of those. So very interesting insights are coming on that. Happy to share it a little later in the session.
Great. Okay, thank you. So very quickly, I mean, I'm going to have just one question, and we're going to throw it up for other for the audience to have ask questions. So if you have any questions to a specific panel member, or if it's a generic question, we'll throw it open to all. Just type in the question in the Q&A. It's in the bottom session. You'll see a Q&A tab. So please go ahead and do that, and then we will. Permitting time, we will try to answer as many, if not all, the questions as possible. So I guess the last question I have for the panel members is regarding the sort of, on one hand, we say we want faster adoption of EVs to reduce our dependency on fossil fuel, which is also the reason why we are seeing rapid installation of solar power. So we've got EVs that are, increasing market share and car park. But on the other hand, we also have that, at some point, the majority of energy is going to come from solar. Now, the challenge with that, of course, is that solar is generated during the day, whereas right now, majority of EVs are being charged at night when there is no solar power being generated, creating a huge demand and supply mismatch. So the importance of energy banking is becoming more and more important. So looking at this question of charging versus rapid charging versus swapping, if energy banking is going to be an extremely important ingredient in the transition or adoption of EVs, specifically through that lens, what is the panel's opinion in terms of then seeing at a steady state or in long term, which is the technology that's finally going to win? And let's reverse the chronology and start with Pankaj, and then we'll go around and then we'll throw it open to questions.
Yeah, I think it's phenomenally strong that to make the whole reason, all of us have come together to do these businesses is primarily because there is a kid inside all of us that has been tugging at us in a single North Star, which is to make this planet slightly better than what we found it. How do you do that? We've all created these technologies, these chemistries, these batteries. At the end of the day, the world will get cleaned up if you're using a cleaner source of power. And your lithium-ion cells, your recycling of those batteries, your utilization of your EVs, reducing carbon footprint, everything kind of, that number really works up when you get some kind of a renewable pump back into the EV. So, the traditional way, moving away from the coal and the other forms of power generation, moving more into the RE. And then you have your battery storage systems that needs to come in to hold that energy. And the typical traditional duck curve that we see, where the peak rises between 6 and 9 p.m. through the domestic utilization. If you look at what is happening in India, two major changes are happening at policy level. One is day of time tariff is going out and net metering is going out. So what it means is that you're going to be charged differentially when you use the electricity. And second is, you cannot just pump the energy back into the grid, whatever you generate on your solar, because that's going to make the grid unstable. So the government's mandate is to put battery storage in play, and that kind of then further substantiates it. The second piece is all these electric.
What about that, and etc., correct? Of course, there's enough number of studies that bumper to bumper, this is much better compared to energy being generated through the non-renewable. However, ideal would be yes, that at source is RE 1, 2 to use RE, especially for example solar, to charge electrics. You need battery banks in between, increases cost. Is there a solution to that? Not to my knowledge. If there's a startup which comes up with a solution to that, then highly likely they should be getting some venture capital ASAP. But not to my knowledge as of now. What I definitely know of that at least the battery pack life cycle management as a value chain is fully in place as a structure. For example, and Anand will agree with me on this, that you have a set of batteries which are going into the system. Once they complete their automotive life, then they are actually already going into storage, which is telecom, diesel generator market, inverter market, diesel generator, obviously, not to a large extent, but it's a decent penetration there. And then they go into recycling, where you are able to extract lithium, which is, residually left, and then it, goes back into a new production. So that's my point of view.
Anant, I think I'd love to hear your point of view on this. Energy banking is an important criteria to determine who's going to win ultimately.
No, it's a very fundamental point, right? As we mature in this space, this will become more key. Right now, it's about electrification, but then that question will become more moot. And I think there are, if I look at battery swapping, it's much nicer to the grid because you're charging all the time at the same pace, right? There's no ups and there's no sine curve there, right? So it's much nicer to the grid today as against, when you're doing charging, it goes up and down, peak powers and all. There's a lot of discussion around B2G, battery to grid, vehicle to grid, I think, and that will, when we are talking to a lot of discoms today, one of the key things they want us to do is how do we get B2G in place, right? That's one of the things they are looking at when have 2 million batteries in a city. That can act as a very fundamental thing, because in the night when you're not using these batteries, these vehicles are not, or in the swapping stations, these batteries are not being used. How can you support the grid? So that's, I think, battery swapping can be a very big advantage there, right? And third is overall, if you look at it, battery swapping, and this is against what Akshat was saying, but actually it needs less battery overall for a system. Battery swapping, for example, if you take a three-wheeler auto, you're talking about 6 kilowatt or 7.5 kilowatt battery there, right? As against battery swapping, which can actually do with 5 in the system and 1.5 or 6.5, less than what you actually need, including the float batteries, right? You reduce the size of the battery. Overall, you're actually reducing the requirement of the power there. So overall, I think that way you need less of resources, right? The circularity is much better, and I think Pankaj mentioned very well, a lot of work is also happening as to how once they reach the second life, there are a lot of applications. And in battery swapping, the applications can be much more because the batteries are connected. You can be doing them using them anywhere. And finally, the point on battery swapping is, when it comes to recycling, when you're in a battery swapping case, a corporate is owning a battery. It's much more liable, and the responsibility lies, and you can actually go after those corporates to ensure that the recyclability is maintained and things are done. Whereas in case of a fixed battery, where it is with everybody and all, how do you ensure that in a country like India? People can be throwing out their battery, which are not good anywhere in the place, right? So a lot of the logistic nightmare to actually manage those batteries, which are not in a corporate space, can be very different. So I think that way battery swapping with corporates can be a big advantage as well.
Oh, great. Kaushik?
No, I echo all the points as mentioned here. Just that we are already doing B2G, and we are in Taiwan experimenting out on our almost 50% of the network is feeding surplus energy back to the grid. We have a partnership going on with NLX, and we will obviously try and replicate some of these learnings into other markets, including those in emerging markets and of course in India. There is one of the advantages of swapping is, especially during the peak demand and peak supply situations, we have seen that especially in a market like India, where people would try and end up charging during either once the people get back home, there's only finite supply of electrons from the grid, right? So how do you then incentivize through different times of the day and encourage people to swap to ensure that during the peak demand, there is sufficient supply? And are your infrastructure capabilities, scalable and stable enough to supply those back to the grid, surplus energy back to the grid? Because there are some cases where in the event of V2G, systems have broken down, and that has created a suboptimal experience for the customer who's actually gone to a swap station to swap. So you've got to have your systems battle tested and to ensure that at least your primary use case is not getting, there's no trade-off in that before you start doing V2G and making sure you scale it on, So, and there should be incentive policies from the government to incentivize these arbitrage opportunities. But absolutely, I mean, second use case and primary, secondary, and tertiary use cases are absolutely important. And I think the government is taking the right steps in terms of getting circularity as a part of the overall EV infrastructure game, which will be a mandate for all the battery makers and swap owner operators, charge point operators to sort of make sure that we have circularity as a part of our go-to-market plans.
Great, thank you. Akshat, does rapid charging help in energy banking and minimizing the demand supply, or it removes the need for it altogether?
So, I mean, I would say a lot of these points are already covered, but I would say that when you talk about rapid charging itself, you need more power from the grid at that particular point itself. But I think if we talk about the time that customer is taking to charge is still less. So overall energy from the grid is the same, but the power that does get into the spike and gets down itself. When you talk about energy storage itself, I think there are two sort of segments out there. When we're talking about a grid level storage systems out there, wherein you need to have solutions to manage that grid effectively also. I mean, traditionally people have been putting up more transformers at the grid scales up. You can actually offset putting up a new transformer by putting in battery storage systems and taking of the peak load. And we talk about like peak load sharing and all those technologies itself. In parallel, I think in the future, a lot of the backend buffering sort of solutions will start to come in when we talk about rapid charging systems itself, wherein your energy storage systems will keep on capturing that energy while the demand is less and giving the boost to those rapid charging systems when the customer is coming out and charging itself. Talking from an India specific point of view, I still believe that there's a very small percentage of India that does overnight parking and charging, and hence even when you do store a solar energy on the daytime itself, you're using it for your regular house applications. What energy is out there, you either store it on your battery and use it in the night itself, and not primarily only use it for charging the ecosystem to go top it up the vehicle itself. So in my view, I mean, the real objective is to analyze how the battery degradation is happening, how the battery is being used, have a second life of batteries in these applications itself. But whether it is rapid charging or a swapping itself, I think both of them require sort of energy storage applications to manage customer experience altogether.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna go through the Q&A. I think the first one is by Srikanth. It's more a comment rather than a question. So thank you, Srikanth. So Billy has a question for Gogoro. Kaushik, Gogoro is known for its two small batteries in Taiwan and Israel. Given that the battery pack costs are significant, will Gogoro seek to move to one larger battery for Indian customers to eliminate the pack BMS costs of the second battery?
No, we will not change the form factor. I think the idea is to sweat your assets and make sure that you have the right products for the right optimal kind of use cases. And we have a plan in terms of figuring out how we will spread those assets on the ground, which segments will come first, how do we prioritize, but we're not going to change the form factor of the battery pack. Thank you.
Okay. Srikanth also, again, another comment in two-wheeler and three-wheeler, India needs cost and revenue sharing ecosystem between players to create a stable platform, keeping in mind cost value proposition driving the end users. Thank you, Srikanth. Anybody wants to add to that? Not a question really, it's just a comment. Otherwise, we'll move on to Sanchit's question. Sanchit is asking the panel members, whoever wants to take this, is there any input on reduction in GST on swapping and charging services? If yes, expected timelines. I'm not sure if any of us will know that, but if do people have an opinion on GST?
So,
And
Kunal, I think to clarify, I don't think there will be any reduction on the swapping of reduction in GST for the consumers and consumers. So they will continue to pay, according to me, 18%, right? That's the same for anybody who's charging or swapping. The discussion, what is happening, Sanchit, is more on the side of, when you're bringing, selling battery in a swappable vehicle and all, there the reduction GST side. So that's not on the consumer
Thank
side.
you. Has a question is asking what swapping high and fast charging low. I guess it's important. I don't know how.
But then a swapping player is giving you the batteries, so he's incurring the cost of the capex and putting up the entire swapping infrastructure, and also they need to be taken care of somewhere. So overall, if you look at the upfront cost is low, right? That's where that's made up by the higher swapping cost, which even if you include that and everything, the overall TCO is much lesser than a fixed vehicle or a battery or a ICE vehicle.
Anybody else who wants to counter that?
Not a counter. Very specific to my comment would be it's very use case specific. People in India do understand TCO intuitively. 4-star, 5-star ACs versus 2-star ACs, petrol cars versus diesel cars. People do understand TCO intuitively. However, the TCO calculation fits in mathematically depending on the number of kilometers from a use case perspective. So that's my only, not a counter, of course, but just a comment there. Correct?
Yeah, I have a very small comment on this. I think today, no matter what you're talking about, comparing a swapping and fast charging itself, you'll have some percentage of float batteries extra, which even though an organization owns or an individual owns, somebody has to put the bill out there. So let's say if there are 100 vehicles on the road, they are effectively 120 to 150 batteries out there powering all those 100 vehicles out there. And if I assume the dollar per kilowatt hour same on whether it is a fast charging or a swappable battery itself, you're essentially having more capital out there, which even though somebody else is financing out there, the end user is paying for that on a per swap basis itself. And in India, I think most of the vehicles get financed. I think there's a very small percentage of the vehicles that get bought by paying all the entire amount upfront. So even if somebody is reducing the upfront cost on the vehicle, you are compensating that on the sort of instead of a monthly EMI, I would say maybe a daily EMI on battery swapping itself. So overall, I mean, whether you buy a vehicle with a fixed battery or a swappable battery, you are essentially paying for the entire vehicle with the battery, whether you are paying on a monthly basis or a daily basis or a weekly basis as it is. But because the float batteries are more, I think essentially you end up paying more on an overall basis. That's what my analysis would be.
Okay, great. Vishal Khar has a question. What role does battery analytics play in both rapid as well as battery swapping?
See, it plays a huge role. See, what happens is your battery is a smart battery, it talks back to you most of the time. That's how it should be designed. I'll give you an example. I drive a premium version of electric vehicle in India. It comes up with, let's say, 400 plus kilometer range. And because we are fast charge guys, we were fast charging all the cars that we had, and every week it would cut off, and we had to send it back to the OEM or the service station. And finally, after 2 months of constantly going back and forth and saying, why every week my new car goes back to service station? They say, because you're fast charging it every time. Not that I'm doing any damage to it. If you fast charge, you may do a damage. If you're not controlling the battery during a fast charge cycles, you need to understand what will happen if you fast charge all the time and you slow charge it. You need to control it. So I think one thing is whenever the fast charge technology gets embedded into a battery, you monitor it very closely because you're pushing a lot of energy into that system and you need to constantly check the health of that. Second is the battery analytics actually tells you the utilization of your asset, not only to you as a battery manufacturer or OEM, but it also, if you're running 50 vehicles and you want to know the entire utilization, how much did the driver drive? The same vehicle, two drivers will get different ranges. And how do you create incentivization programs if you don't understand how the battery was being used, how it was driven, what was the kilowatt hour per kilometer kind of a efficiency, so on and so forth. So I think battery analytics will sit at the core of monitoring what you've invested into, both for the battery technology company, which needs to understand what's happening to my tech, the OEM to know, how's my service and what's going to be happening to my warranties, and for the end user to know that how did my technology perform as per a larger cohort where I could sweat it more, I can extract more. Unlike an ICE engine where it doesn't really matter how much, you ballpark your average kilometer per liter comes out similar. But in EV, that's not the case. So I think it horses for courses, but the battery analytics is at the center of knowing fully what's happening with the asset.
Right. Thank you, Pankaj. Himanshu Gupta has a question. He wants to know what happens with lithium-ion waste after it's completed its 3,000 plus. 3,000 is pretty impressive, but after it's completed its cycles.
Yeah, so today recycled lithium is more expensive than virgin lithium. Recycling lithium requires you need to melt the batteries, you have to cut them up, you have to digest them into acids, you need clean rooms, you need purification steps, super expensive stuff. Whereas if you buy directly from a vendor that you bring your lithium when you're making your lithium ion cell, it's far more cheaper. Honestly speaking, lithium is only 2% in a lithium ion cell by weight. What people are hunting for is perhaps lithium is one part of it, but largely the global recycling industry and lithium ion cell is centered around extracting some of the other rare material, which is cobalt. Cobalt is something that you want to get your hands on to. And recycling cobalt from a lithium ion cell is still cost effective than getting it from DRC. Now, when you put that in context to what's happening in India, India is moving into LFP technology. What do you want to extract from LFP? Iron? You can get iron at 1/10 the cost in the open market. Why would you want to extract it from lithium? So I think you have to wrap your heads really pretty well around lithium ion recycling in perspective. What is it that you're hunting for? At what price point you're hunting it for? And what's the end application where you want to bring it? In our perspective, and Log9 has already invested into that direction. Do check up something called direct cathode recycling. It's not the raw material that you're hunting for. It is the form in which that raw material is sitting inside your cell that you need to get access to. That's a chemical process. So that's what is perhaps going to be the future. It's at least a decade away from the market right now. But that's where, if you can get every material the way you can put it back into your cell, recycling will become the next big thing. But at this point of time, it's very expensive.
Great, thank you. Faizan Qureshi would like to know what's happened to the battery swapping policy which was being drafted by NITI Aayog. Is somebody aware of the current status on that?
So battery swapping policy, I think we should see it out in the next few months, 2 to 3 months. Everything, all the inputs that were supposed to be given, I think government did an exceedingly good job in getting the industry stakeholders together to draft it. I think there were a lot of questions around interoperability and all, which
I have a call. I'll finish it. I'm finishing a call.
Yeah.
10 minutes.
So, I think to directly answer your question, Faizan, I think another 3 months, 2 to 3 months, we should be looking at the battery swapping policy in place.
Sure. Okay, I think we can go to 5:15, right? If I'm not mistaken, or do we have to wrap up? Rachit, what's the timeline on this? So we can keep going at, I guess, for another 5-10 minutes. Whoever needs to go can go. Dikshit's asking, when will these batteries that are being swapped, battery swapping will start becoming available for retrofitting?
It's already is. We are doing retrofitting already So it's there for e-rickshaws. Everybody knows it. We're also doing retrofit of two-wheelers now. So it's a pretty simple affair. You know, a few hours, in 2-3 hours, you can do a electric bike into a fixed battery electric bike into a retrofit of a swap within few hours. It's already happening.
Sarjot Ben's asking a very important question. Is battery depreciation faster in swapping or fixed charging?
It'll depend how you manage those
It
batteries.
depends on the use case.
It depends on the end, on the technologies that you impregnate there. So if you make a shitty battery, it doesn't matter whether it's in the fast charge network or in a swap network, it will get depreciated. If you understand electronics, if you understand lithium-ion technology, if you understand thermal propagation, thermal properties, cooling technologies, you can make, the idea is to extract the maximum out of a battery. And between swap and, in swap, you have an added advantage that you have a much more controlled environment when you take the battery in cooling chambers. And so you have to create similar conditions that you may have in a swap center inside the battery when you create the batteries, and both are possible.
No, Pankaj, very valid point. I would just like to add, see, it's very, the only difference is about the behavioral usage, I think, right? Not in the chemistry or thing, but because let's say battery swapping, the charging is only happening in a very controlled environment, whereas when people have fixed batteries, they're charging all over the place in home, and the power cutoffs are there, and all those things, the quality of the power, the surge in the power, it impacts the battery one way or the other. So that impacts, but which is not the case when corporate is taking care of the batteries, because that's their main asset. So it's the behavior that drives the, thing there.
Great. Let me just take a few more questions. Shankar Thakur is asking an important question. We talked about, I think the government was also was announcing a policy on standardization and interoperability. I guess he wants to know is that when will standardization and interoperability becoming a thing so that battery swapping becomes easier for customers?
So in a very recent meeting, the minister had with all the industry stakeholders, because that's where the entire battery swapping policy was stuck, that standardization and interoperability, where the call was taken that they will not be going ahead with standardization and interoperability for the time being. It will be only, the standards will be only for safety and performance, not on design and dimension. So I think we are hoping that the new policy that comes out will be sense, design and dimension standards. Kaushik can answer more on that, I guess.
Yeah, I think the whole idea of interoperability from the government is to make the battery swapping network accessible and affordable. So as long as partners, battery swapping players are providing an accessible network, it shouldn't be a problem. Second thing is interoperability of batteries, different batteries into different swap stations and vehicles. It's a massive safety hazard. And those safety hazards cannot be just let go, because it's an unlimited brand risk, reputational risk. It's basically you're putting a price on the life of a person, right? So that can't be calculated. So we have, as an industry body, explained over the last couple of years the challenges, the technical challenges of interoperability. It's not as simple as just getting a gas cylinder of, from one supplier to another supplier. These are multiple combinations which exist. So I think in a sense, the government has got a good flavor of what the industry is seeking, which is focus on safety standards, harmonization, and thereby reducing, hazards, incidents, so that there is no erosion in consumer confidence in actually going for EV products. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Sanjit Gupta wants to know us for swapping and charge point operators, I guess mostly franchisees. Will the business continue to be larger hyperlocal, considering network needs to privatize increased and improving utilization as cost of infra will only increase in your future? Anant?
I think, Sanjit, it will be mostly hyperlocal, I would say, to make good money. For a franchisee, it better be hyper local to an extent, right? So yeah, short answer is there are many questions down, so it will be hyper local.
Yeah, I think we got a few more minutes. A good question here. Safety. From a safety point of view, which is better, swapping or charging?
And it again boils down to the same underlying principle. If you're designing a battery in the right manner, are you making a good battery or not? Whether you're doing swapping or charging, as we earlier discussed about, it's about the behavioral environment in which we are charging the battery, whether you're doing a swap or rapid charging itself. Apart from that, when you design safety, you have to design safety for the battery. And you can design a good safety on the battery when you're doing a rapid charging as well. So I mean, both are equally possible.
So the only thing that happens here is that I agree, Akshat. The thing is, since in swapping, most of the accidents, the fire accidents that happening when they are charging at home, right? It's while charging. So and it's behavioral as well, right? So in swapping, there is no charging. So it's happening outside your entire this thing. So I think that way it's safer.
Rajesh Tiwari wants to know how he can join a portfolio company of one of the panels. I guess, Rajesh, the best way is to visit their websites and see if there are any job openings that are mentioned there and go ahead and apply for the same. Because I'm sure, given what's happening with EV, there's a lot of interesting and exciting job opportunities in the entire sector. Himanshu Gupta wants to know how can we call this?
Rajesh, so sorry, Kunal. Rajesh, or anyone who's looking to join, please start typing on your phones AVINASH at electricpe.com. Just right.
There you go. Allowed you to give a pitch. Himanshu Gupta wants to know if his green energy, he thinks there will be a lot of dead plastic and other waste making it to the landfill. Is that a justified concern of Himanshu's?
Not really. I think Pankaj is the best person to answer this. But
yeah, I'm not concerned too much. At the end of the day, although I said that lithium is a small portion, and the rest of the stuff is not that valuable at this point of time. But also we have to be cognizant of the fact that the batteries will enter into recycling in next 2 to 3 years, so on and so forth. So we're going to have a very escalated matrix of recyclable batteries that will come into. If you have a battery that's going junk, what do you do with that? Well, it's economically viable to ship it to China, get recycled. There is a vendor, there is a company, there is a full setup which sits where you get a bang for the buck for recycling. So if you look at it, the waste that goes to the landfill is something that you cannot extract value from. So that toothbrush, that that plastic, that single-use plastic, it's far more cheaper to produce new than to have a recyclability on that. But I think as far as lithium-ion batteries are concerned, there will always be a process to break down these batteries. So I think in the hurriness to recover some of the raw materials, the recycling will always get kicked in. So I don't expect too much of a landfill waste that will come out of this lithium ion in the next 3 to 5 years. And I'm sure in the next 3 to 5 years, the cost of production of the battery is going to go down. Similarly, the cost of recycling is going to go down substantially. So there'll be incentive to recycle.
I think we've just got a 1 minute more time. So unfortunately, we are not able to take any more questions, but I think we've had a very, very good response from the audience, which means that the panel has done a phenomenal job in creating interest and being able to. I've never seen such a response. But anyways, I think to summarize, now that we're out of time, thank you so much. I think ultimately the summarization is that India needs all sorts of technologies. We're going to see battery swapping. We're going to see slow standard charging. We're going to see rapid charging. Of course, smaller form factors. In the near term, battery swapping seems to be the clear winner. For larger form factors, I think it's going to be a combination of slow and rapid charging. Difficult to say where things will stand maybe 10, 15 years from now. I think what we can all agree is that India is rapidly getting electrified. Not just EVs, but the entire ecosystem is under disruption. starting from components going all the way to aftermarket. And I think all of us are very excited about playing a small role in helping in that acceleration and adoption of EVs. So with that, I want to thank all the members who took our time, came for the panel, and appreciate that. And also to the audience for hanging on and also putting through across some really nice and interesting questions as follow-up. So with that, I'd like to conclude this panel.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, Kunal. Thank you.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye everyone.